Hi, this is Roger Bartlett.
Are you here? Well, if I had $1 to wager, I'd say you're here. And you're tuned in to the Paul Leslie Hour. Oh, we've got an interview today with Roger Bartlett that originally went out on the radio. It's been tucked away since 2007, but now it's a pleasure to bring this to you. You're about to hear your host Paul's interview with songwriter, guitarist Roger Bartlett. Roger Bartlett's a solo artist and was also the front man for the band Hell's Kitchen. Oh, Roger was also the very first ever member of Jimmy Buffett's Coral Reefer Band. Interesting, huh? Let's have a little history lesson. Back in the beginning, Jimmy Buffett typically performed solo and would then sometimes have harmonicist Greg Fingers Taylor informally sit in. Then in 1974, Buffett started his first official Coral Reefer Band with just one other musician. Accompanying Buffett was Roger Bartlett on guitar. The next year, Buffett added Harry Dailey on bass, Philip Fajardo on drums, Fingers Taylor on harmonica and keyboards. And since he was the first band member, Roger Bartlett is known as the original guitarist of Jimmy Buffett's Coral Reefer Band. We hope you enjoy this in-depth interview with Roger Bartlett. Oh, in addition to talking about the old days of Jimmy Buffett's Coral Reefer Band, he talked about his life in Manhattan, New York. Roger talked about his songs, which have appeared in some unusual places, including the movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Roger Bartlett will tell you all about his childhood in Louisiana as the son of Ray Bartlett, famed radio host of the show Groovy Boy, the Boogie Master. Before we begin the interview, we'd like to invite you to please subscribe to Paul Leslie's YouTube channel. It's free and it's fun, and we got dozens more interviews and reviews that'll be added by the end of 2023. We thank you for subscribing. Helps the show, helps us, and it helps you. And with that, there's really only one thing left to do. Let's begin the interview with Roger Bartlett.
I live in Manhattan.
Oh, okay. You like it there?
Yeah, I love Manhattan. Before I moved to Vegas, I lived in Vegas for a little over a year, but I lived in Manhattan, forever before that. So, even though I was born in Louisiana and grew up in Arkansas and Texas, I moved here a long time ago, and they call it the capital of the world. Within 3 miles of my house, or within 3 blocks of my house, you can get anything you can think of, and some things you never imagined.
That sounds pretty tempting. So you were born in Shreveport, Louisiana.
I was, yeah.
Did growing up in Louisiana, did you get interested in the Louisiana styles of music?
Well, I was born in Louisiana. My father was a disc jockey at the time. He was on a radio station, KWK8, and he had a radio show called Groovy Boy, the Boogie Master. And he was also the announcer for the Louisiana Hayride, which at that time was a competitor with the Grand Ole Opry. So I sort of had the dual influence, or the triple influence of, the Cajun stuff that was going all around me, the blues stuff that my dad played on the radio, and the country stuff that, filtered in through the Hayride. The people that were appearing on the Hayride at that time were like Hank Williams, Eddie Wells, Johnny Fortin, Jim Reeves, Johnny and Jack, and, and Elvis came on later, back before he met Colonel Tom, when he was just the king of the hillbillies. And, went out to have raw oysters with my dad when I was a kid, with me and him and Roy Orbison and Stonewall Jackson. So, it was a fertile ground to develop musically. Yeah, definitely.
So growing up, what kind of music was your personal favorite?
Well, I've always had a problem that my tastes are so eclectic. I like every kind of thing that's good. I like the blues. I like the funk. I like the jazz. I like the country. I like the bluegrass. I like the rock. I like some of the metal. I like some of the electronica. Anything that's really good. I'm sort of drawn to, and it's great for me in that, I don't get bored with one kind of thing, but it's bad for me in that, seems hard for me to stay within the lines of a style.
So how did you make the leap from being a music fan to being a musician?
Well, my Uncle Tommy, when I was, I guess about 10 or 11, had a guitar school. He and his wife taught the accordion and he taught guitar. And so he taught me out in the West Texas town of El Paso, beautiful, beautiful brown eyes, and hang down your head, Tom Dooley. And, I played that for a while, and then I sort of let up. I played for about a year, and then I didn't play that much again until I was about 14, when the Beatle thing started happening. And then I picked the guitar back up, and we got a garage band going. Our first band was called The Legends. And we were legends, at least in our own mind.
So, how did you end up being a Coral Reefer?
Well, I lived in Nashville 4 different times. And one of the times I lived in Nashville, I was working with 2 guys, Mike Lind and George Worthington, and we had an acoustic trio called the Outlaw Brothers. And we happened to open for Jimmy Buffett at a place called the Exit Inn there in Nashville, which was so named because the front door was barred closed and you came in through the back. Then, I don't know, a year later, or a year and a half or something like that, I'd gone to Austin, Texas with a new partner, a guy named Bill Callery. And we played down in Austin for a while, and then, we sort of had different musical directions, and we split up as a group. But I was playing bass and mandolin for him at a club called Castle Creek that a guy named Doug Moyes ran. And Jimmy happened to be the headliner, and Bill was opening for him. And, I just started sitting in with Jimmy on the gig, and he liked it that I could just play along without having to rehearse or anything and just sing harmonies, and at that time he was having some success with Come Monday. So he was traveling alone, and doing the road by yourself is a pretty lonesome endeavor. So, he hired me out of Austin. I went from, hanging out in Austin to the next thing I know, we were playing at the Troubadour, opening for Hoyt Axton, the guy who wrote Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog, amongst other things.
When the band was first coming together, you mentioned in the beginning it was just you and Jimmy Buffett. And a lot of people I hear, they say that Greg Fingers Taylor was the original Coral Reefer. But it was actually you.
Well, Fingers did go out and play a few gigs with him. He was actually, at that time, he was with Larry Raspberry and the High Steppers. So in that respect, he was out on the road with Jimmy before I was, but only for a gig here and a gig there. I was the original Coral Reefer in that I was the first guy to go out on a regular basis with him on the road.
One of the songs you wrote, I was listening to "Fool for a Blonde," and that was in the classic the classic movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. How did you get the inspiration for that song?
Well, I have a long history of blondes, and so that contributed some. But me and my friend Bill Calorie, when we got down, we used to go to a sidewalk cafe. Right, Austin has the University of Texas there, and there was a sidewalk cafe called Les Amis. And, we would sit out there and drink coffee and watch the college girls walk by. And there used to be this one waitress at Les Amis. Her name was Karen Ford, I believe, who was just the babe of babes. And although she was not a blonde, she ended up with Bill for a while. But there it seems to be a surplus of blondes in Texas. I don't know why, but I'm for it.
I've noticed a lot of the songs you wrote for City Street seem to be influenced by women. It seemed like a lot of songs, which is a good thing, I think.
Well, I mean, how many songwriters could you say that about?
Yeah, but I mean, I thought that too. But like listening to your music, it seems especially prevalent. But they're good. They're great songs. I like the song "I Don't Care." It reminds me a lot of people I know.
Oh, well, I remember the girl I wrote that about. Unfortunately, she already had a boyfriend. But there was many times that I didn't let that stand in my way. But, as I got a little older, I began to realize the error of my ways.
When after the first year that you and Jimmy Buffett toured, when it was just you and he, the next year he picked up some more people. He had, or maybe it was the year after that, when he picked up the drummer Philip Fajardo and Harry Dailey on bass, and of course Fingers Taylor on harmonica. I was wondering, how did that come about? How did he find these other guys?
Well, that's an interesting story. Actually, Philip was a friend of mine from Austin, and he'd been playing around Austin, so I grabbed him. And at that time, Jimmy was managed by a guy named Don Light. And Don Light had another artist named Gove Gribner, Gove. And Gove knew Harry. So that's where Harry came from. And, Fingers had been around, off and on for the whole time. So that's where he popped up from.
I heard Fingers Taylor say that throughout all the incarnations of the Coral Reefer Band, he told me, he said, the best ever lineup was Roger Bartlett, Harry Dailey, Philip Fajardo, and himself.
Well, that's very flattering of him to say so, and I'll write that down so I can bring it out whenever I hear him talking later. But I tell you, Jimmy's band now is excellent. His guitar player, Peter Mayer, is just amazing. And Roger Guth is an excellent drummer. And Jim Mayer is an excellent bass player. And Mike Utley, what more could you ask for than Mike Utley? I mean, he plays great piano. He's a producer. He's a writer. Actually, Utley did come in with us off and on back in those days. He was working for Chris Christopherson and Rita Coolidge, but when they were off the road and he was available, we brought him out on the road with us then too.
I wondered if maybe what he meant was the band in that day. The band, I got to agree, it's a really tight band right now, but the band, at least the older recordings I've heard, it was more of relaxed kind of sound and more of a. It sounded more like or I don't know how to put it in words exactly. More like a rock band, you know?
Yeah.
Like kind of more. I don't know. I can't put it into words.
Well, I mean, we were a little more raw, a little edgier. You know?
Raw, that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, there was more ragged edges to what we did, and part of that was because we were partying like it was 1999.
Are all the stories that I've heard through about?
Well, probably.
I guess with a band name like the Coral Reefers, what can you expect?
Yeah, really. I mean, back in those days, we had a T-shirt that we called the D&O Award. So it was the Drunken Outrageous Award, and if you threw up, it was an automatic win. And so the D&O Award sort of traveled between the different members of the band. Whoever got the drunkest and did the most outrageous stuff, got the T-shirt, and it was quite a competition because we did explore the limits of artificial inspiration.
You called in to the show a while back, and you said thank you to Jimmy Buffett for putting you and Roxy in the same room, but but that you were sorry that you didn't make the most of it. But I was just wondering, because this has been in my mind for a while, who is Roxy?
Well, Jane Buffett had a friend back in those days named Roxy Rogers, who was just a total babe. And, back in those days, there might have been, the budgets might have been a little thin now and then. And, so to save on rooms, they stuck me and her in a room together. Of course, in my state of inebriation, you reflected about the subject of many of my songs. Well, when we were in a room together, my initial thought was, oh boy. Unfortunately, it wasn't her thought as well. So, it's like going into a donut shop and having the counter locked back there.
I noticed there's one of your songs. There was one that you cut both on the Hell's Kitchen album, but you also did on the Live at the Windjammer album, which was a reunion of the first Coral Reefer Band. And the song is called "Going Down to New Orleans."
Oh yeah.
And I take it that's a city that you can appreciate.
I do love New Orleans. I haven't been down there since Katrina. But actually that song came from a friend of mine, Zeev Gilad, who's an Israeli filmmaker, did a movie called Dog Run. It has a big segment that occurs in New Orleans. And he used a bunch of music that he didn't license. And then when he finally got a distributor, he went in to license the music, and the costs were just prohibitive. So he had to get all new music. So for the New Orleans segment, he'd had a Professor Longhair song in there about Mardi Gras, and he wanted me to write something like that. So that's where that song came from. And it was in the movie Dog Run, which was a small independent film that it played, I think the major markets, it played New York, LA, it played Europe. Let's see, I get royalties from like Belgium and France and Spain and Italy from that movie. So, I do love New Orleans though.
I imagine you like the culinary offerings that New Orleans provides.
Indubitably.
The song "Give Me Something to Eat."
Oh yeah, well that was actually written by a friend of mine named Chris Carter, who ironically enough, is a little skinny guy. You know, it's always the skinny guys who go in there and can eat mounds and mounds of stuff. When you know, all I have to do is go by the place that serves beignets, and you know, I just sniff in there and I gain 5 pounds. You know, so but "Give Me Something to Eat" was a great song. I love that song. That's why I did it. I still do it.
One of the songs you wrote, Dallas, was covered by Jimmy Buffett, and I was wondering how you got the inspiration to do that song.
Well, at that time, I lived in Dallas, and I was with a band called Bacchus. You know, the name of the Greek partying god. And the band began to crumble. The girl singer in the band began to have psychotic episodes or schizophrenic episodes, and you know, we were playing Las Vegas style clubs, and at that time I was a stone hippie boy, and they had me wearing a short-haired wig. You know, I will have to say though, we did get to open for some great people. We got to open for Count Basie, and we opened for Bill Haley and the Comets, and we opened for Jackie Wilson. You know, who had "Your Love Has Lifted Me Higher." So, I mean, we had some great gigs, but the whole thing just started falling apart. And, you know, that's the promo man part of the bridge there. But, you know, looking back on that time, I might have been a little hard on Dallas itself, and it was just really the circumstances that I was experiencing at the time.
I wanted to know back in those the early days of the Coral Reefer Band, is there any fun memory that still kind of keeps in your mind?
Some sentimental kind of memory about the Coral Reefer Band. You know, the Coral Reefer Band was not exactly a sentimental endeavor. It was more like party time, you know. I mean, it was great times. We had some really terrific times. You know, I can't tell you, you know, to have those experiences, you know, was unique, and I cherish them, you know, and I try not to go over them too often because you want to look ahead, but you know, I will have to say the one thing about being in the Coral Reefer Band, not very sentimental, but you know, one of the greatest things about working for Jimmy Buffett is that he is such a reader, and he used to pass me books that he'd read from different authors, and you know, that was an exceptional thing. I love that. You know, he introduced me to a lot of great authors.
The soundtrack for the movie Rancho Deluxe has a song that you sing on, "Left Me with a Nail to Drive."
Yeah.
And I was wondering, weren't you in that movie?
No.
No?
I wasn't. They wouldn't spring for my airfare to come up there and be in there.
Oh, I see.
So the band consisted of, I think Fingers made it up there for it. But it was like, I don't know if even Fingers, I think maybe the actor Warren Oates played the harmonica player. I can't remember who the band was, but, you know, I remember at the time they wouldn't spring for my airfare. It was not in the budget.
So how did you come to do the vocals on the song?
Well, you know, Jimmy was working on songs for the movie, and you know, as always in the music business, there was a big deadline. So you know, that song just kind of got whipped out, and then when we went into the studio, I think he'd been singing for a while. He said, "Hey, do you want to sing this one?" I said, "Sure, no problem." So that's how it was, just sort of serendipitous.
when you're not doing the music, either in performing or recording, what kind of stuff do you usually do with your spare time, if there is any?
You know, I play the guitar. You know, I just sit around with a guitar in my lap while I watch TV. I walk around the house with the guitar strung across my back. When I go into the bathroom, I take the guitar with me. You know, so it's just like, you know, I am a reader. I love to read. You know, I living in New York City, I love architecture. I do go to museums and stuff. You know, and I love to go out and see live music. I mean, especially now, you know, you're going to see the last of live music, you know, because if things keep going the way it's going, it's going to disappear.
What makes you say that?
Well, clubs are disappearing. You know, used to, whenever there was a dance club, they always had a band. Now when you go to a dance club, they never have a band. You know, there used to be middle class music and, you know, steady gigs all around. You know, you could work at a club and you could work there 6 nights a week, you know, and you could work there for, you know, 7 months or 10 months or, you know, there's no gigs like that anymore. You know, there used to be a lot more clubs with live music. Now they all have recorded music or DJs.
And it makes you kind of wonder if it's like all the technology, everything is so electronic now. Everything is so instant. And it's almost like we're losing something in the process.
Well, you know,
we're losing the rawness, like we mentioned.
Yeah, we do lose the rawness. You know, everything is very slick. You know, and people get used to sitting around in their media cave there, and you know, I guess they feel like, you know, why should I go hear somebody sing, you know, Justin Timberlake songs when I can just put on a CD and hear Justin Timberlake or watch a video? But at some point, you know, they're killing the goose that laid the golden egg because, you know, the world is emerging and you know, the United States is not going to be preeminent in science or art or, you know, culture or whatever, you know, if you know, they decide that mediocrity is good enough, you know. We're in the age of good enough.
When you had after you'd been playing with Jimmy Buffett for a couple of years, how did it come that you left the band?
Well, you know, at that time, looking back on it, you know, there was a steady stream of people following us around with names like Captain Easy, you know, and Captain Easy had a shrimp boat, and he'd go out for a few days, and he'd come back, but he never seemed to catch any shrimp. But he still seemed to drive a Mercedes and have plenty of money. So he also had some other goodies along with him, and as well as other people. And, you know, I began to get to the point of where, you know, my cheek was twitching and my finger was twitching, and, you know, I was getting a little paranoid. And I think something in my body said, you know, something in my subconscious said, it's time to jump this ship. You know, so at the time I was, you know, intent on going to do my own music, but I think really way down, deep down, it was really because I was getting overserved in the artificial inspiration department.
I see. And what happened after you left the band? What did you do next?
Well, I moved to New York City. And, you know, I started playing with my own band around New York City. And I picked up a manager. I got on a compilation album out of WMMR Philadelphia. And I got some more songs and some other movies. And I began to, you know, as a songwriter, back in those days, you know, to do a song demo, you had to hire a band. You know, you had to go into the studio. And so, you know, one song would easily cost you, $1,000 to do with studio time and musicians. So as I, spent, I don't know, $8,000 or $10,000 a year working on song demos, I began to engineer myself. So I began to do some engineering in the studio and got a job in the studio as an engineer and began to produce some other people and do different stuff. I had a TV show here for a while on cable TV called Midnight in Manhattan, and I was a night crawler. And got in a couple other movies, just that sort of stuff. Did sideman work for other people.
A few years ago, you did a live CD. Well, actually, it was kind of like a collaborative effort. You had there was Grace Bell on it, Philip Fajardo, the late Harry Dailey, Fingers Taylor, Deborah McCall, Keith Sykes, live at the Windjammer. Tell me how that came to be.
Well, Bob Robinson of that Parrot Head Club down there in South Carolina got us all together at the Windjammer Club there in the Isle of Palms, on the Isle of Palms, which is just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. And, we all showed up, and the club owner happened to have a Mac that was hooked up with 24 tracks of digital audio. So, I talked to him before the thing to see about recording the thing, and I tried to send out CDs to everybody of everybody else's songs, so everybody had a good idea of what was going on when they got there. And I hadn't seen some of those people. I hadn't seen Jake Bell in a million years. Hadn't seen Deborah McCall in a million years. Hadn't seen Keith Sykes in a long time. I'd seen Harry several times down in D.C., saw Fingers occasionally. Although I think that was no, that wasn't. Fingers came into New York a couple of times. I met him and his then wife and their two little boys. And so we had like very minimal rehearsal time. Bob was in a band, but it was kind of an acoustic band, and he didn't realize we actually needed amplifiers for our guitars. He thought we were just going to play through the PA. So we were scrambling at last minute trying to come up with amplifiers and come up with equipment here and equipment there. And, the fact that we got on stage and did so well was just nothing short of a miracle.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of really great cuts on that. It really surprises me that it wasn't a thought out. I figured it was probably planned and all that.
Well, not really that planned. I sent out CDs to everybody, but Jay got the CD and there was nobody around to tell him what it was. Jay's blind. And so he didn't listen to the CDs. And he got there sort of at the last minute. He'd done a gig the night before, and I don't think he really listened to the CDs. But Harry did. Harry listened to the CDs, and Philip listened to the CDs. So the basic rhythm section I think was cool with tunes, and came out pretty well.
You wrote a song kind of in memorial to Harry Dailey.
Yeah.
Heaven's Man.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about Harry Dailey?
Well, Harry was a great guy. Harry was a gentle guy. He had a good heart. He was a good bass player. He was a good singer. He was a loyal friend. In the early days of the Coral Reefer Band, we all piled around and had a great time, and the camaraderie between us was really unusual, and it was nice. And after Harry left the band, Harry stayed on beyond when I did, when I left, And I don't know. There was such a large amount of artificial inspiration going around. That by the time he left, he'd done some irreparable damage to his body. The doctor told him, some of that partying had caused his hip sockets to dry up, and in his 40s he had hip replacements, and during that time, uh, it was just bad for everybody, and you can see by the fact that after he left, I mean, also during that time he got hepatitis C, I think, which was like, caused him, terrible pain and just debilitated him, and due to the fact that he had so many medical problems. I mean, that was, one of the causes of his untimely death.
So after all these years, do you have you seen Jimmy Buffett lately, or do you ever see him?
I do see him occasionally. I did see him in Las Vegas. I moved out to Las Vegas for about a year, and when I first got there, about a year ago, October, they came through and played 2 weekends in Vegas, and for like, I was just barely in Vegas, and Jimmy invited me up on stage to sit in on Margaritaville, and said, ladies and gentlemen, the original Coral Reefer. Here, I want to introduce him to Las Vegas. And, people went, yeah, and, despite the fact that everybody there was from out of town, it was very nice, and I enjoyed it. So I'm backstage, talked to him for a while, and, it's hard to talk to people really backstage because, they're getting ready to go up and play, and I know personally when I'm playing a gig somewhere, I'm trying to focus in on the gig, and, shooting the breeze backstage is really not my priority, but he did take out time to talk to me, and, it was really nice. Then this last year they came back and played the MGM Grand again. I got down there to see them both weekends, and hung out a little with Utley and Peter Mayer and Robert Greenwich and Jim Mayer and backstage a little bit, and they had some special guests in this year. They had Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead, and have you heard this new album of his, Take the Weather With You?
Yeah.
That's an excellent album, I think. I really like that album.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
I can't think of the name of the band, the boy band, the three guys from England who...
Gomez?
Huh?
Gomez?
I guess. They were there and they sat in too, so those are the last times that I saw Jimmy Buffett.
Do you have any plans to come out with another album, or?
I am working on a CD right as we speak.
Interesting.
I just put down some new track. I've got I think about 5 songs recorded, and I'm working on a 6th song right now. As soon as I get 10 or 12, and I'm going to pop that record out.
All right. Imagine there'll be a couple songs about women.
Oh, yes.
So when you look back on your life, what would you say is has been the best thing about being Roger Bartlett?
My family. I have the greatest family you could ever have. They've always been there for me. And, they've always been supportive. I look around at other people's families and see them trying to sabotage each other and ragging on each other. And, I can't say that my family's perfect, but, when it's time for them to be there for me, they are.
So my last question, since this program goes out all over the world, What would you, Roger Bartlett, like to say to the world?
Come see me play. Buy my CD. Go to cdbaby.com. Look for Roger Bartlett.
All right. Well, Mr. Bartlett.
And go to rogerbartlett.com, too.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I thank you for giving us the time.
Oh, nice talking to you, Paul.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you for stopping by today. If you enjoyed our program, consider telling a friend about it. The Paul Leslie Hour is made possible through people just like you. So you want to keep the show going, right? Go to thepaulleslie.com. That's thepaulleslie.com. Click on Support the Show. And thanks to everyone who contributes. Performance of the intro music is courtesy of John Primorano, The Entertainer, written by Scott Joplin. End credit theme music is courtesy of John Primorano, the traditional song Corina Corina. Your announcer is Dan Gold. Hey, that's me. The show is hosted and produced by Paul Leslie. And we'll see you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.